Okay, welcome everyone to our July 31st, 2020 meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group. My name is Alan Edinburgh. I'm leading this team here this morning. As we call to order, this is being recorded for later posting off the town website and by Westborough TV. This meeting is being conducted remotely pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group will be conducted by remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner. It is being recorded and will be posted by Westborough TV. A link will be provided on the committee website, on a committee page on the town website as well. Limited in-person attendance of members of the public is permitted. Every effort will be made to ensure that public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technical means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Note that since Westborough TV is not available to broadcast this meeting live, it's being recorded and will be provided to Westborough TV for posting. It'll be on their website and YouTube channel. We'll put links on the town website. We do have, in addition to members of the committee today, we do have 3 guests, and as well as residents of Westborough who are not on the committee but want to actively participate in our work. And so, discretion of the chair, they're joining us here today. Our agenda is pretty packed, so we'll keep things moving quickly. First, we'll be discussing and voting to approve the minutes of our last meeting dated July 17, 2020. Ed will be, and I'll help him present, but we'll be discussing and reviewing an outline for a draft recommendations and action plan document, sort of getting a sense of what the output of the effort is here today as we move forward with our work. And then I will introduce Hank, who has sent us a draft of discussion points around governance framework. So today he'll be presenting that. We can handle a few questions, but we'll set up and discuss what we want to do at future meetings and how we want to facilitate that discussion to make those decisions. At 8:30, Jim Robbins, our town planner, and Fred Leonardo, our building commissioner, will be joining us to talk about affordable housing, our 40B and SHI status, and some zoning questions we've had as we move forward. Hi, Amy, welcome. And then at 8:45, a gentleman from a software company, Co-Urbanize, will be coming in to demonstrate a platform to help us with community engagement. The Massachusetts Housing Partnership has offered to pay for us to be able to use the service. So they'll donate the service to us to help us engage with the community as we move forward with our work. So after that demonstration, we'll have a brief discussion and vote as to whether or not we want to use the platform. We then have some time at the end just to review next steps and action items, and I promise we'll be out of here as close to 9:30 or by 9:30, if at all possible. So that said, first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes, and I will need a motion. Or if anyone has any edits to the minutes, we can let me know and we can motion as amended.
I'll move to accept the minutes as written.
I'll second it.
Okay. And any comments, questions, clarifications? Nope. Okay. Then because we're remote, we need a roll call vote. So I'll just go sort of in the order that everyone's on my screen. So Steve?
I abstain, not having been there.
Amy?
I approve them.
Ed?
Bain, yes.
Hank? You're not muted, Hank. You can speak.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay. Oh, no worry. And I will vote yes as well. So we have a vote of 501, 5 yes, no no's, 1 abstention, 6 being present. Did I count that right?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So next on the
No, 5 being present.
you're right, 5 being present. 5 present and okay, so it's 401, 5 being present. I stand corrected, or corrected as the case may be. Okay, so next up on the agenda is from the operations team, headed by Ed Bain, a discussion of an outline for a document. Do you want me to share my screen, Ed?
Yeah, why don't you share yours?
Okay.
Just as Alan's getting that set up, basically I've been doing 2 things. One was creating this outline or scaffolding that just, at least provides us a draft or something to discuss, talk about, comment on. As far as a report that will be sort of a bit of the foundation for the October town meeting that will be available to the public and will describe, the housing situation in Westborough, some of the problems we're having with affordable housing, and then moving on to an action plan of what we would like to do, as well as discussion of the specifics of the trust and what it can do and can't do, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to go through this pretty quickly. This is on the shared drive that Alan has shared with us. So you could look at that and, offline, what have you. But basically, skipping the executive summary, to tell the story about Westborough housing, really, I have the current housing profile and put in some historical context. There's actually a version, but it's okay. I can read off of this, Alan, where I sent another one.
I'll try and pull it up. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, but basically the historical context of that, I'm going to use some of the sources. That's the second thing I've been doing, is getting a lot of sources and storing them also on the shared drive, from various, state and federal and some local data sources. So anyhow, but the historical context, we talk about how Westborough started, et cetera, et cetera. Our location, development and growth over time. So these would be trends, both narratives and charts and, graphs, et cetera. Then we'll get into the current demographics and as well as trends that we see. I have some data going out to 2040 from the census and American Community Surveys, DOR, Data Bank, Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. Data banks with that, show age distributions, which have changed over time. We've seen a drop in the sort of younger, the 20 through 30 year old group. So that trend, household income over time, our employment profile, and then the workforce in town. Workforce in town, I was able to get from Leah Talbot, our finance director, a dump of all employees, not the names or anything, but basically the zip codes where they live. And from that, I can calculate their rough distance from Westborough just by zip code distance to show that the majority of employees in the town and the schools live outside of Westborough. And then we'll be able to see, because that's one of the problems we're facing, is affordability for Well, obviously town employees. We would like as many town employees to live in town as possible for a variety of reasons, but the affordability of housing may be a barrier to them. We'll go through a little bit of geographic discussion. I'm looking for help from Jim on that. You're a town planner, and actually, I know Steve. In the past, you've done a lot of work on zoning back in the day, and I would be looking for your help on that as well. Talk then about some of the current residential housing stock. If you want to go up to the next page, Alan. Just the growth. Okay, so you have the new one up. Okay. I have asked John Steinberg, who's our chief assessor, to get me, there's a form, the recap sheet that they have to submit every year, which basically is related to our tax rates, where it does list in detail the type of structures we have. So single family residence, multifamily, condos, apartments, as well as commercial and industrial buildings. So basically, that will give us, and I've asked for 10 years and then maybe 5-year increments going back, hopefully 20 years. Excuse me. So I'm hoping to get that from him within the next few weeks. We'll also talk a little bit about the Chapter 40 status, a little bit about industrial commercial properties, housing market. This I'll be looking for help from some of the realtors on the group, just to get either trends. Some of I can pick up, but we really need to look at how much in demand there are, and how quickly things turn over, as well as price, the prices of homes. I have some data from DOR on that already, etc. Once again, need to look at current zoning to see, well, are there areas where there could be developments of affordable housing or conversions to affordable housing. With that, then we go into the third area, which is basically what we're going to then do. So we've given people hopefully a snapshot, or at least a background on housing in Westborough. And then we go into housing affordability. We talk a little bit about Chapter 40B, which I think a lot of people know at least the name of it. We'll go into a little bit more detail. And then we can enumerate the existing affordable housing, where the Westborough Housing Authority, WHA, has pretty good detail on that, and I'm sure Jonathan and or Jim Robbins would have additional things. Then go into housing costs. Some of you are aware of the SHI metric, which is the subsidized housing inventory, which is affordable housing inventory. But then that leads into what we call the cost burden. In other words, generally 30% of your housing, of your income should go, at most, should go to housing. And we can see how particularly apartment renters are very cost burdened in Westborough. And the other areas, we're not unique in that sense in Metro West, I think. And talk about some of the barriers, what the needs are, then some of the barriers, what's keeping us from producing more affordable housing. Is it we're not being as aggressive with inclusionary zoning, or possibly just the cost of development in Westborough. Then I'm going to look to really the governance group. I know Hank is heading that up along with Alan, to go through what is a housing trust, an affordable housing trust, the legal aspects of it, etc. So that, I put some points up there, Hank. I would ask you to maybe look at that along with Alan, maybe Steve, and see what other, how to redo that if necessary, as far as the structure. And then lastly, we would go into what our recommendations are. Obviously, one of the recommendations is please accept the state language to create the trust and get it set up, fund it, which I'm sure will be another article on the fall town meeting. And we also then talk about our mission, guiding principles, types of projects we might be looking at, etc. So a lot of this document is really to inform, provide a structured way for the community to look at what we want to do for affordable housing, and provides us a way to, if you will, sell it and answer a lot of questions. So that's about it. I would hope that we would keep this document 35, 40 pages maybe at most. You think it should be less, Alan? I see your grimace. Well, it depends. We can put in a lot of pictures with charts and tables and trends and things like that. So
No, it's fine. It's just a lot of work, but I appreciate it. It's a good starting point.
okay. Any questions before we move on? I've taken my 15 minutes.
Ed, just a couple of comments from Hank.
Sure. Yep.
One, in the conversation, we sort of assumed that employees who do not live in Westborough make that choice for reasons of affordability. We would need to, show some data about typical salaries in Westborough. We believe we're paying competitive, so again, we need to, you do something just to show that, that's a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, some of it that is going to be a little harder. Some people live, if you have a spouse, we have one situation where we have an employee, a department head actually, who lives in east of us, in a town east of us, a couple of towns, but his wife works, I believe, in Boston. So, for commuting, they've decided to stay in that community, even though it's, comparable to Westborough in cost, because it's convenient. So there's a variety of things, but, it gives us hopefully a general idea. And then as we can get anecdotal evidence of, like pick people at distance and ask, why are they that far?
Yeah, we can compare our salary profile to the affordability numbers.
Yes, we can.
Some simple thing like that doesn't disclose who anybody is. Or the second comment is that we'll need to make sure that the data we put in there ties to other policy and planning documents the town either has or is preparing, such as the master
plan. Right. I've been looking at the master plan.
To the extent that stuff is there, we have some existing policy and planning docs. We'll just have to cross-check and make sure that we're not dramatically different in terms of what we're presenting. Otherwise, we'll confuse people.
Absolutely.
Some people will read.
That's true.
People will read and parse the details.
And the good news is John Gelchik, who's joined us here today and is willing to help with our efforts. He is I should have had you introduce yourself, John, but he's a resident of Westborough. He is on the housing subcommittee of the Master Plan Advisory Committee, so he can help liaison and coordinate there. He also professionally is the town planner for the town of Hopkinton, and so he brings some great domain expertise when it comes to planning, and that's part of what we're doing here. So it's good to have him participating. The other thing I sort of want to say about, sort of looking at the demographics of where town employees live is it's one of many indicators of affordability and can help us understand, qualify, and quantify the issues around workforce housing, right? So, there are other communities who've had to do housing production plans with respect to 40B, and they've, for example, surveyed business owners, and said, how many, you own a restaurant, how many of your employees live in town versus other towns, and you own a small office doing consulting work, how many live in town, how many live in other towns. There's a way of trying to gather a broader view. So looking anonymously, just how many employees by zip code gives us a rough sense of workforce housing demand, not making any assumptions that employees live in other towns for strictly economic reasons, or that's even the primary reason. But it just gives us a sense for the community that we're trying, one aspect of the community we're trying to serve here. So Ed, it's 8:22. What is your next step? What help do you need?
All right. The next step is to start to take a lot of the data sources, which, as I mentioned, is up in the operations, and start to work on fleshing out, if you will, some of these areas. Writing up, creating some charts. They don't need to be final production, but at least making sure we're capturing the best data, and just keep expanding on this, section by section, as I'm able to gather the right data, and then have that go around for review, however we want to split that up. So I said there's some points in there that on that slide where I'm saying I need information like from the town planner's office. If somebody with in the real estate profession has some good data sources for pricing in town, especially trends, demand, etc., both in Westborough and in our neighboring communities. That we're trying to get a little bit of a, because Shrewsbury is a lot more affordable than Westborough. Then that begs the question: okay, well, why is that, etc., etc.
If that's the case.
If that is the case, right? No, so I do have in there where there's needs for content. So I would ask people as they're able to just contact. You can contact me directly on my email.
Okay, great.
And I think Alan and I can structure the governance stuff so that it looks like Section 4.
Yes, if you could do that, I can plug that in, or you can plug it in the document online. That would help, and just so that way we can see the overall view of what we'll be presenting to the town.
Interesting way of being able to work remotely and separately, and then combine stuff together without enormous amounts of editing.
Right. Yep.
Okay, great. So we have some next steps there. Now we'll move on to the next agenda item, and that is Hank sent out a document with some of the framework issues and discussions. Do you want to share that, Hank, or should I share my screen?
If you could share your screen, I've got it up on my screen.
Okay, I will share my screen.
I can share it if you. I'm not
no,
sure
I got it. I got it. We'll just take a second.
Yep.
Okay, so Hank, do you want to walk us? Can everyone see that okay? Oop.
That's
sure.
good.
Just it's kind of identified some topics, if you will, and some sequence, and an awful lot of things about housing trusts are set by statute. So trustees and membership, the basics about trustees, the appointing authority, who they have to be, terms of trustees, are all set by statute. So they're all the appointing authority is the Board of Selectmen by statute. One trustee is a selectman. Terms of the trustees are 2 years by statute. By the way, I believe because the town already has a bylaw that says if you're on a town committee, you have to be you have to reside in the town. I think that's locked in by our existing statute or structure.
Right. Our bylaws, excuse me, Hank, our bylaws do allow for non-residents if they have specific expertise relevant to the committee.
So I would suggest to you, we got a good bylaw. Let's not mess around trying to modify it. Let's let the appointing authority decide, and with our input. Number of trustees, I've looked at some examples. They seem to run 5 to 9. You know, with these town committees, you really got to worry about how do you get quorums for action, and how do you prevent small groups of people from controlling things. Just so that you can always have a reasonable chance of getting decisions, you probably want to stay with odd numbers. So I would suggest either 5 or 9. My personal preference is to stay with 5 because getting 9 people together for these kinds of activities is pretty difficult, and 5 is probably plenty. The meeting frequency set at a minimum of quarterly, and I think you need to allow the trustees to set a more aggressive schedule. So that's kind of my commentary on membership and selection and such. Another key issue is funding sources. You're probably all aware that the town of Westborough has chosen in the past not to accept CPA. Many of the housing trusts and communities around us are in communities who do have CPA, by the way, Community Preservation Fund money, which is a surtax on your taxes, anywhere from 0.5% to 1.5%. We haven't done that. However, it would seem to me that eventually Westborough is going to decide that their strong interest in open space, historic preservation, and affordable housing is going to need continuing sources of funding. So eventually the town will embrace CPA. Whatever we can do in the charter to prepare for that, we ought to do. We're going to have to sort out some other things about the existing funding. In the past town meeting, we set up some stabilization funds to receive mitigation dollars. Not clear to me exactly how these dollars can be dispensed. Not clear to me exactly how they get transferred. My sense is at the moment, we're in a situation where the trust is going to have to periodically go to the town meeting and ask for money. I don't know quite how to structure that. That gets to be kind of messy to go all the time asking for money.
Okay, so I'll comment on that briefly. So the stabilization funds that were created were to capture the current incoming payments so they wouldn't fall to free cash. So we would need to go to town meeting to have any of those funds transferred into the housing trust. At that point, we could explore identifying there's certain payments from the Del Webb project that can only be used for affordable housing. And so I believe we could also ask town meeting just now that the trust is established, to not use the stabilization fund for that. I believe it's $1.4 million that will come in over the life of the project. But as far as the allocation from the mitigation funds related to the Zoning Board of Appeals decision, that $9 million, and what percentage we would need to ask town meeting to allocate that over. There also is, the Board of Selectmen has created a Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee with the goal of recommending or not recommending CPA, and if so, bringing it forward probably at annual town meeting next March.
Yeah, I think if we could somehow, if you set up a housing trust to deal with affordable housing issues, then the stabilization funds we've set up, it'd be good to liquidate those and transfer those funds into the affordable housing trust, even if it's by some mechanism, so we don't have to keep going through multiple, put money in stabilization, then go and move it into a housing trust fund. And every time you do that, have an argument about why are we doing this? Why don't we spend the money to reduce the taxes or do something else like that, which inevitably will happen.
Well, one of the things I've been thinking of in this regard is that if we have product, that is, if the Affordable Housing Trust is somehow associated with a recommendation to go forward to create some affordable housing, that there be a fee structure for the service of the Affordable Housing Trust as part of that project, for which at that point in time, a percentage of whatever is being raised, particularly if it's by the town for the purpose, would come back to the Affordable Housing Trust for its continuation. So that way the town gets a work product for the money that's being allocated, rather than vacuuming the money out of other accounts that aren't necessarily targeted for the Affordable Housing Trust. So, you know, a quid pro quo, if you will, kind of funding source. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, we probably need to spend some more time thinking about that and talking about it. But the next area is spending controls and oversight. Some of the trusts use the. I mean, the Board of Selectmen is going to really have to give us some indication of what level of spending, what kind of oversight and spending controls they'd like to have. It would seem to me, as a minimum, the committee the housing trust ought to be periodically, once a year, twice a year, going back to the Board of Selectmen, telling them what we're doing and what we're planning to do. The less restrictions you put on the less spending controls you put on the housing trust, the more effective they're going to be. If you get into this, if every single project prior to committing to a spending level and a project and a location has to go through a lot of oversight, you'll really slow down the process and just bring a lot of politics into what has to be not a political process. In general, I think other than having town meeting have control over the total amount of money that is put into the fund or the total amount of spending the fund can do in a year, the oversight ought to come from the Board of Selectmen, because that gives you at least the flexibility. It's an oversight body that meets twice a month. If you have to go to town meeting for oversight for every spending decision you make, you're going to make the process almost impossible to move forward. So again, that's another area we got to discuss. But I think, Alan, something from the selectmen saying, "Gee, hey, this is what we think. This is the kind of oversight or the level of oversight we'd like to have, beyond having somebody on the committee who knows meeting by meeting what's going on in detail."
Okay. I guess sitting on the Board of Selectmen, I think would be helpful if we as a working group maybe sort of surveyed a number of housing trusts and proposed a level of oversight to the Board of Selectmen with pros and cons, and then there'd be a discussion of whether that was the right benchmark or it should move up or sort of up or down from there. I'm not sure that the board has the background on this to determine what's appropriate. So looking at what other trusts are doing.
Yeah, Alan, I can serve. There's probably 4 to 6 housing trusts that I've had some contact with the trustees. I could go survey some of those trustee chairs and get an understanding of how the oversight works in their communities.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yep.
Okay. So any other questions for Hank?
No, I just wanted to, just a comment, per Steve's suggestion is, if we can set up a metric, if you will, vis-a-vis the stabilization fund, the Del Webb money, and say that some X% of that will be transferred automatically to the housing trust. And we do that hopefully as part of this fall meeting. That eliminates the need to keep going back to request transfers from the stabilization fund into the trust fund. We can always go ask for more, but I think getting some percentage at least set up would be good. That would eliminate the need to keep going back, and as Hank pointed out and Steve pointed out, you don't want to get into that situation. Otherwise, you're going to get into a fight about funding every town meeting.
Okay. It's definitely something for us to consider and propose. Okay.
And that's another thing we can look at other towns of how they've Granted, most towns use their CPA money, and I don't know if they use all of it for housing, because it could do a variety of other things, open land, etc.
The towns with CPA money end up having a CPA committee.
Yep.
And the CPA committee recommends where the money goes.
Right.
And typically at least the housing trusts I've worked with in the past, they go to the CPA committee every year and ask for an allocation, and they compete with the open space and
Right.
and such folks who are all making proposals on an annual basis, and then that lump sum goes to town meeting. Not even the CPA, I believe, has to go to town meeting to be dispersed, but it gets dispersed in large chunks. For either affordable housing or open space or historic preservation to a specific committee.
Good.
Okay. So that's something we'll continue to work on as we move forward. At this point, I would like to introduce Jim Robbins, our town planner, and I believe Fred Leonardo is joining us as well. We had asked, last meeting we had some questions about affordable housing, 40B, SHI, and Jim's here to share some information with us.
Thank
Welcome.
you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me? Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry for joining the meeting late. I had an 8 o'clock meeting and I've actually got a 9 o'clock meeting. So I'm kind of with Jim here, so I'll do my best to talk about the subsidized housing inventory and the overall outline of what Chapter 40B and affordable housing at the Commonwealth means. So Chapter 40B was instituted at the Commonwealth in 1969. And what it basically required is that the town do its best to reach 10% of its entire housing stock to be designated affordable. And affordability certification is centered around the broad concept of someone being eligible for affordable housing that's created either by the community or by a private entity, by a private developer through the 40B process, if they earn less than 80% of median income in the county. So in our case, we're in Worcester County, and we're in with a lot of communities that have a lower median income. So the level for Westborough matches that, which means because we're a more affluent community, fewer people are actually eligible for the housing than say in one of our sister communities outlying Worcester, which is an entitlement community, a CDBG community, because they have a much larger impacted population. But because we're an affluent community, fewer local people actually qualify under the income guidelines, which is probably disappointing, I would think, for the residents of Westborough. The guidelines themselves have not changed since 1969. And communities have reached out to DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, to ask them to allow the communities to be a little bit more creative. They've accepted projects that are age restricted for seniors. However, in recent years, they've come up with a policy that requires all individuals to be 62 and older. And as you probably know, over the years, communities have designated seniors to be 55 and older. And we have several 55 and older communities in town, one of which has 40B affordable housing in it. That project would probably not be allowed today. And we're aware of the Pulte project, which was under the old guidelines, 55 and older. The state disallowed that age restriction, said you'll either have to raise the age restriction to 62 or we will not qualify the units. And as you know, because the project had already entered into an agreement with the town and begun construction, we weren't able to modify that. Instead, we got a contribution to the town to create additional affordable housing. And I heard you discussing that when I came in along with the CPA. The subsidized housing inventory, which is often referred to as SHI, is the actual number of units that we have in town that are considered affordable. The SHI is calculated by the total number of units, residential units in town, divided by those that qualify under the 40B guidelines. Right now, the town is at 13.4%. So we're above our minimum requirement of 10%. However, the planning board over the years has wanted to negotiate friendly 40Bs to keep our percentage above the minimum requirement of 10%. If you fall below the 10%, a developer can propose a project that we may not be in love with, that we may not wish was proposed. If you're over the 10%, the Zoning Board of Appeals, who reviews and approves the 40B projects, cannot accept the project. They can disallow it. They can allow it if they consider it to be a good project, or they can dismiss it out of hand and deny it if it is not a good project. So what we've done, what the planning board has done recently in the last couple of years, is to require an affordable component of all housing styles. And at 5 units or more, a project must deliver 20% affordable housing. We initially said 20% of any development, but that would mean if you did 2 units, you'd have to provide an affordable unit, and that could make a project unaffordable. So we amended that to be 5 units or more. That would include single-family residential in a subdivision. That would include apartments, condominiums, any multifamily development. If there are 5 units or more at increments of 5, they must provide an affordable unit. If you propose 10 units, you've got to provide 2 affordable units. This is the way that we intend to stay above our 10% minimum requirement. So that's how the SHI works. And I've only briefly described the 40B process, where we've sent several letters recently to DHCD to ask them to consider modifying their guidelines to make other projects that we have in town designated affordable. One of those is the Highlands, which is the senior project right across the street from the post office. We're working with both the Highlands themselves, as well as the state, to qualify that project. Questions?
I believe the problem with the Highlands was the kitchens were not of what they considered full size, so we couldn't count some of those units or all the units as residences. Is that correct, Jim?
That's correct. So the Highlands is a unique product. The Highlands, as you know, is an age-restricted development that provides full services for all of their residents. People that live there must be able to take care of themselves. So it's not a nursing home or an assisted living facility. They do have a medical professional on site, but that person doesn't know more than to respond to an emergency. They don't provide reminders for you to take your medication even at the lowest level. The project provides significant amenities, 3 meals a day. They have a cafeteria. They also have a small little restaurant. So if you want to go downstairs and get a cup of coffee and a sandwich, you can do that. They have a hair salon. They have a theater. They have a recreation facility. It's really a self-contained, high-end community. However, when you factor in all of those services that are provided based on what a resident pays to live there, the amount that they pay actually falls within the 40B guidelines. So when we approached DHCD initially about this, and the developer actually was the one that reached out initially to make sure they would qualify, they only looked at the rents, and DHCD said, it looks like you qualify. The project was built out, and then when we submitted the permit to DHCD, they look at the unit to make sure they can certify it, and they noticed that they didn't have a meal choice option, which means if I want to eat in, I only have a cooktop and a microwave. I don't have a convection oven. I don't have a full kitchen, so they would not qualify the unit. That's the type of technicality that I'm talking about with trying to get DHCD to modify their guidelines.
Jim, will the master planning exercise we're doing forecast out give us an idea of how much affordable housing we need to create to stay within the 10% going out 10, 15 years?
So one of the basis of a master plan is a build-out analysis. And it looks at the land that's zoned for residential development, whether it's single or multifamily or mixed use. And it does an estimate of what the total overall build-out in each of those sectors would be. And it gives you total build-out. And if you compare that to what our current housing stock is, our current affordable housing stock, we can determine what our shortfall would be, or if we're keeping our head above water, or if the zoning bylaws that we currently have in place that require 20% of future development to be affordable would cover that. So I guess in a brief answer is yes. However, obviously during the development of the master plan, there are other things that are considered. And I see John is on this this task force, which is great. And by the way, John, you've got the right hat on. I like that. Nice job. And as you probably know, John is on the Master Plan Advisory Committee, and John is a professional planner. He understands residential development. So I'm sure going forward, if you have questions about how a build-out analysis works and how you project your SHI, John can jump in there.
Jim, I have a quick question. Back at the Affordable Housing Forum in January, we presented a slide that looked at the current SHI and what commitments were, what time-based and perpetual commitments were there, as well as looking at typical rates of development and doing a projection. Do you think that data is still current and accurate? And if so, I would just share that with the committee.
Well, the data that we projected at the time, thank you, Alan. I'm glad you brought that up. That's good data. The data that we projected at the time, I believe, would have been accurate. COVID, of course, has messed things up. I don't know how we're going to come out of that. I don't know what kind of demand for housing there is. One of the more recent discussions at the state level and across the country in regard to this is that people want to live out in the suburbs now. They want to leave urban areas because they're concerned about personal contact with people and communicable diseases. And so they feel that there's less an opportunity for the transmission of contagious diseases if they live in the suburbs. I don't necessarily agree with that, but as a professional planner, I think I have a different perspective about that. Obviously, social distancing can impact how we live our lives. But I think that for the average layman, the average person in the public, they think if there's fewer people, they're going to have fewer opportunities to come in contact with a communicable disease. So we may see, and again, I say may, we don't know until we come out of this, a change or a move to the suburbs. I will say this, that over the last few months, I've received a lot of calls from multifamily developers who want to build multifamily developments in Westborough. They're not afraid of the 20% affordability requirement, which is a good thing. However, they are looking at the town of Westborough, and what's saving us right now from probably 3 or 4 applications is the fact that we don't have any sewer capacity in our wastewater treatment plant. So obviously a multifamily development requires connection to sewer, and we don't have any additional capacity for multifamily in our treatment plant. And as some of you probably know, if not all of you know, we share a treatment plant with 2 other communities. So we're not totally in control of that. In order for us to relieve that cap and get more capacity for multifamily housing, we have to do a comprehensive wastewater management plan, a CWMP. The last time ours was done was over a decade ago. And that's something that the Department of Public Works and the Engineering Division is looking very seriously at right now to update. The outcome of that would affect our capacity in the sewer treatment plant.
So Jim, not to belabor that point, but is there some metric that we could say, well, how many new units of different types of residences could still be built within Westborough and have the sewer treatment still have the capacity?
Right now, we're saying none. So if you came in with an application today, yeah, 0. So if you came in with an application today,
Yep.
even for a single-family residential subdivision,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to perk the lots for individual septic systems.
For septic. Okay.
Yeah, we have a small subdivision application in front of us right now that each of the lots needs to perk, and you're probably familiar with the Silver Hollow Estates project up on Mount Pleasant. That was 24
Yep.
residential units on a condominiumized septic, so they're not on town sewer. There were a couple homes that were removed to create the development. Those are, they maintain their connection to sewer because there was a house connected there before.
Right.
But new homes all have to be septic at this time.
So, Jim, I was not aware that we had a sewer connection restriction in town.
It's residential only, Hank.
Okay.
So for commercial, we have an allocation for both commercial and residential. Right now, there's no cap on the commercial. That's good news.
Yeah, I can speak to the group septic system design cost. They're astronomical, and as a result, they're not going to see very many residential subdivisions that come forward with that as the only solution relative to town sewage.
Are you saying, Steve, that any increase in the current treatment plant is astronomical, or just the septic, doing septic systems?
Group septic. In other words, as Jim said, if you can perk your own lot, I mean, it's the same old that most has had. But I mean, the solution for a significant size subdivision, for which particularly the terrain features in Westborough are basically rock.
Mm-hmm.
The probability of perking individually is slim. So, that solution then turns into a group septic system, for which 3/4 of Silver Hollow, for example, is a group septic system, and the physical or the actual cost for that in that kind of terrain is astronomical, and therefore there's no affordability going to result from, say, group septic systems for construction of those houses. So those are going to be drivers for the need for more affordable housing based on anybody that's willing to spend the money, and therefore have house lots that sell for more than $1 million a piece, something like that.
Yeah, these so-called package systems also are very difficult to maintain over time, and are going to require a lot of intervention and supervision to make sure that the condo associations maintain them. They're very expensive to install, very expensive to maintain. It's a very complex treatment process.
Right, and Hank is absolutely right about the maintenance costs. They are also very, very large.
Okay, so on that note, I want to thank, as we step away from septic for a moment,
Quickly,
and affordability, we'll leave that behind. It's interesting, when my wife and I purchased our home, we were informed by a real estate agent that they no longer refer to it as septic; it's private sewer, because it sounds better in the listing. So on that note, I want to thank, I know, Fred, we really didn't tap you and grill you with questions this time, but thank you for joining us and being here and being available. We appreciate you taking the time. And Jim, thanks for joining us. You're welcome to hang out until your 9 o'clock meeting comes in.
Please feel free to tap me for information in the future. Ask any questions. I'm available. Any of you individually wish to call me, I'm open to any of that. Email, whatever you'd like.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. And I'd like now to introduce, and correct me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. It's Gaten Daphnis.
Right.
Okay. Gaten Daphnis is with a software platform company called Co-Urbanize. They provide a cloud computing solution for community engagement, and it's used frequently by the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, who's a statewide nonprofit that advocates and supports and has many programs around affordable housing. And Mass Housing Partnership has agreed to pay the licensing fees if we as a committee would like to use Co-Urbanize as a tool as part of our community engagement. The initial plan was would have been we would start using it in April or May as we launched, and continue through town meeting this fall. Given our shortened time frame because of COVID-19, certainly I believe they're still offering it through town meeting, and we're checking to see if they'd let us use it a little bit beyond that as well. But I thought it'd be helpful for us to make in order to make a decision whether or not we want to leverage the platform as part of our community engagement tools, to have Gaten come in and talk about it and do a quick demo.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be connected. So I'm not sure, has everyone had a chance to kind of at least go on our website, or is at least a little bit familiar with Co-Urbanize?
I would assume that we're not familiar with it.
Okay.
And just give the brief overview.
Sure. So I'll walk through a few slides, and then I'll hop over to a live project page just to give you an example of what it looks like in practice. But essentially, Co-Urbanize is a technology platform. So we're not PR or marketing or boots on the ground. It's really a purpose-built platform for both planning and development projects. So essentially, it's a centralized location online where you can post project information, educate the community, keep them up to date with the project's progress, but also be able to collect meaningful input from the community in a really scalable and efficient way through a platform that's moderated. So it really helps to chip away at the misinformation being spread online, on Facebook, Nextdoor, things of that nature, and really have a centralized location where people can really go and get the information about the project and have more of a fact-based conversation. So we work with a lot of different types of companies. So a lot of commercial real estate developers, anywhere from the large REITs down to mom and pop shops, and then we work on a lot of affordable housing projects across the country. With teams like Mercy Housing, Wind Companies, who are doing a lot of work on both coasts. And affordable housing always has a stigma and a lot of misinformation about the projects. And it's a great way to really get the facts out to the affected stakeholders. And then we also work with municipalities. So, we're based in Boston, so we worked with the city of Boston on Imagine Boston 2020. We work with Cambridge. But we also work across the country and in different coasts with a lot of municipalities to make sure that we're building awareness for their plans and really conducting equitable and inclusive engagement for all of their planning initiatives. So as I mentioned, Co-Urbanize is a website. So it's a website where your team can share what you want, where you want. It's a great way to post project information in a really scalable way and get information out about the vision and keep people up to date as the project progresses and matures. So we have two main products. One is more geared for development. That's what we call our co-build project. Kind of this format here. And then for our planning initiatives, it's more of a map-based engagement outreach model. So we have a map-based engagement tool, as you can see here, where people can really add input at the neighborhood level, zoom in and provide really specific feedback about what's great in their community, what could be better, areas where they would like to see, different things in their communities to really, have a better way of life. So overall in Co-Urbanize, there are four things that, we really help teams to accomplish, and be first and foremost, be more inclusive. So we work in, a lot of different areas, from we worked in Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is like one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City, but also in more affluent places. And, we're making sure that everyone's voice is heard. Typically in the public meeting process, you get the same faces, you get the usual suspects, as we like to call them, that would show up to every meeting, would be loud, would be vocal, would be organized. But, a lot of the times, their comments and sentiment is not representative of the rest of the community. So we really like to open it up to more people and make sure that you're getting, feedback from a lot of different, types of people, diverse backgrounds. Secondly, Co-Urbanize really helps you to communicate proactively and easily and in a moderated forum. So Co-Urbanize handles all the moderation on the platform. So unlike, Squarespace or sites like that, where people can make fake accounts and a lot of different aliases and spam your website, Corbinize handles all moderation. So we have someone on our team each day that goes through all of the comments and all of the signups for your project. First, verifying that it's a real person using their real name. Secondly, making sure that they're, engaging in a constructive way, so no spam, no profanity, no slander. So if someone is, not abiding by our community guidelines, our team will really handle that, reach out to them, let them know why their comment wasn't published and what they have to do to rectify that for their comments to be taken into the public record. So really make sure that you're having a lot more of a fact-based conversation around your project and really a constructive dialogue with real people in your community. And the last thing is really helping to activate that silent audience. So we leverage a lot of different tools and features, both analog and digital, to make sure that we're capturing as many people as possible and all the affected neighborhood stakeholders. So I'll touch on those in a second. So these are some of the main features on Corbinize, which I'll talk to in a little bit more depth in the next slide. But you really have the tools to inform the community, get information out, engage the community, get information in a variety of different ways, whether it be through language translation, for example, for people that, English might not be the first language, or even, people that like to engage, digitally, leveraging text message feedback, things of that nature, to make sure it's really easy for people to get involved. And it's a much lower barrier to participation and saying, hey, come to my 2-hour virtual meeting Thursday night, things of that nature. And the last thing is we provide tools for the product team as well to really analyze and synthesize the information that you're collecting. So we have a whole back end of the platform that's private to your team, where you can, really look through the analytics, the audience you've reached, your engagement over time. We even have software that detects the positivity, neutrality, and negativity of each comment. So you can really, get that sentiment analysis, and let people know that we hear from the same 20 people at all the meetings. We've gone above and beyond in our outreach, and here's the data. Here's the concrete data that really shows that some people might not be thinking the same way that you are. So it's a great way to really fold all the data that you're collecting and Corbinize into the public record. So three features that I want to highlight quickly is, so on Corbinize, there's a feedback section, essentially a comment section, which is, I would say is a built-in survey. That's where your team can set a variety of different comment topics. And, we recommend that your team switches it out, every 6 to 8 weeks to keep it fresh and keep people engaged as the project moves forward. But that's where you can really collect feedback about a variety of different topics that are meaningful to your project. So, you can leverage polls, open text feedback, and even upload images that you want people to provide some comment on, for example, design feedback. The second feature that's been really powerful is SMS Text Integration. So as you can see up top, what we're able to do is design and deliver a sign for your team. This is one that we did with the Cambridge Development Authority. And essentially what you're able to do is ask the community a question as they're walking by, so they can kind of engage more authentically. A lot of people are on their phones these days, and that's how they like to share and receive information. So we thought it'd be beneficial. So what we do is we purchase a local number, we integrate it into the back end of the platform, so that when people do see the sign, they take an action, they respond, they provide their comment. Those comments go right into the comment section on the Corbinize page, so they're connected. And then that person gets automatically signed up to get updates from your team. So now you start to build a funnel of eyes that may not have been aware of your project, or haven't been involved in the conversation, but they're now in your ecosystem. They'll receive all the updates that you send out, and they'll be able to go back and share more information and more feedback with your team. And the last thing is something that we rolled out pretty recently. It's allowing people to comment via voicemail. So we got a lot of feedback that, especially in neighborhoods that we work in, where there's more of an elderly population and people aren't as tech savvy, this has been the preferred way for people to engage. So essentially, we would similarly purchase a number and allow people to just leave a voicemail. Their name, who they are, and their comment. And our team would then transcribe those into the comment section on Courbanized, so that at least they have an avenue to get their voice be heard, let their voice be heard on the platform, and it's a much easier way for them to engage than getting familiar with a tech product like Courbanized. Any questions as I jump to the live website? Okay. So here's an example of what a typical co-build or a development project website looks like. So this is one that MHP has sponsored as well in Wellesley. So it's a Wellesley Square redevelopment. It's mixed income housing. So there's definitely an affordable housing component here. And it's all residential. So this is the info tab. This is the main page for the project site. As you can see, people can subscribe and can log in so we can verify them. So this is where your team can share information about the project, what's in the works, what's there now, what's happening next. And even link to the comment section to have people provide that feedback. Over here, you can also add any logos of people that are part of the project team. Share any public benefits that you want people to review, location of the project, and then down here in the information and plan section, that's essentially your built-in online filing cabinet. So this is where you can upload any documents that are relevant for the community to review. And they can just click on and open up the PDF right then and there. Over here is your update section. So this is your e-newsletter system that's built in. So anyone that's subscribed to the product site or has commented will get these updates whenever you send them out. So they'll get them either in their email inbox or as a text message on their phone, depending on how they opt in. But this is a great way to get the information out at scale with the click of a button. So, they sent updates about introducing people to the product site, what this is, thanking people for the feedback, linking to the comment section to go in and learn more, and even, letting people know about new questions that they're posing. So you can, upload any images or link to any sites that you'd like to, or any uploading documents here. But this is a great way to really get information out at scale to everyone that's following the project. Over here's the timeline. So it's great for people that are late to the conversation to learn what has happened to this point, but also looking ahead, learning what's to come. So, great way to get people that were, not involved in the beginning stages up to speed really quickly, and let them know what to expect going forward. And then over here is the feedback section. So as I mentioned, this is the comment section. This is the built-in survey. So this is where your team can post topics and switch them out, at pretty much a 6 to 8 week frequency. So you can have open text responses, you can have poll responses, you can upload images here as well. And as you can see, they're asking people about a lot of different topics that are important to their project. A lot of people like to highlight public benefits in this comment section to really have a much more constructive dialogue and get people excited about what's being delivered. And then down here, you can see all the comments made, as you'll see people using their real names. And then the project team, in this case, which was Trinity Financial, was able to respond directly. And so whenever, Trinity responded to Tim Flynn, in this case, Tim got an email in his inbox saying, hey, Trinity Financial responded to your comment. So it really, goes a long way in building that relationship with the community, letting them know that you're listening and that you're taking their feedback into consideration. So it's a great way to really highlight the important ideas or concerns, especially ahead of meetings, to kind of take the temperature of the community and learn what's important to them, what they'd like to see, what could be improved. And even, the project team or community members can support comments. So, comments with that are supported rise to the top. The ones with the most supports will be at the top. So you can really keep an eye on what's important to the community. And then I'll hop over here as well, just to give you a sense of, what some other types of questions are being asked on the platform. So in this case, they're asking about community benefits. What is your Bristol memory? How can you preserve the culture? And things of that nature. And what some teams will do just to really spell out or highlight really important points is to create these custom tabs that we can prepare for you. for example, FAQs. So really, this goes a long way for affordable housing projects. Just letting people know, for example, what is a 40B? What's a friendly one? What's an unfriendly one? You know, what is the current affordable housing stock in the community? You know, what are we trying to keep it at? So it really helps to educate the community really quickly about, you know, these types of projects and highlight any information that is being really important. So I'll stop there. Take any questions that anyone has.
Hi, Gaten. This is Ed Bain. It looks like this product, and it looks great, is really focused on, once you've identified a project, to engage the community in order to inform them, get feedback, you know, respond, etc. You know, prior to, if you will, a town meeting vote or some vote that will actually, you know, put things in place. At this stage of our development, if you will, no pun intended, for a housing trust, we haven't even established a housing trust yet. Mm-hmm. You know, we're just trying to get to the point where we can establish the trust, you know, get some funding, and then, you know, start the process of looking at projects that may be appropriate. And I'm wondering if that may be a more appropriate time to engage, you know, your company as we get a specific project.
Yeah, we've seen both. So we've seen situations where a team, as you mentioned, have identified a project and they have, you know, a path forward. They have a vision that they want to get feedback from the community about. And other teams that use Corbinize really early on. So we have another feature where we're able to collect private feedback. And a lot of development teams will use that to kind of take a temperature of a proposed area where they're interested in working, to get an understanding of, you know, who lives there, you know, what's important to them, you know, what improvements they want in the community, you know, what type of housing they want, you know, things of that nature. So you can really take a temperature early on and get that information before you even have a real solid vision or a real, you know, project lined up or identified. So we've seen people use Corbinize through all stages of the development process, you know, from concept, pre-development, all the way through construction. So there are definitely applications, you know, for teams that maybe don't have a concrete project, but, you know, can leverage Corbinize in different ways to start building that audience first and foremost. Let people know maybe something might be happening here. You know, what would you like to see? What would you like to see improved? And then as you get that feedback and you start to create a plan internally, then you can come back to this audience and say, hey, you know, thanks for providing that feedback. Now we have a path forward. Here's our vision based on the feedback. Please provide some comment.
And I guess I would add to what Gaten just said that one of the challenges we face is, and I think we saw this at the Housing Forum in January, is the difference between perception about our community and the actual data and the reality, as well as, you know, the issue of affordable housing, even as Jim Robbins alluded to earlier, is complex as far as the rules and where we're at and what the risks are and how it might move forward. So I look at the FAQ, I look at the ability that we can use this as a way to share and educate the community, but also, John's on the Master Plan Advisory Committee's Housing Subcommittee, and the Master Plan Advisory Committee, did a survey and had some open time for community engagement. The open period is still going on. There's online discussions on their site, but the survey was completed. Relatively limited feedback is what happens with surveys. And so as we think today, and we'll talk about it quickly before we adjourn, for our engagement effort, what questions, coming up with, what questions we want to ask. Do we want to repeat the questions that that were in the master planning survey and expand on those to get more information to guide us? I firmly believe that when we go to town meeting and present this for approval and acceptance, that being able to say, we've listened to the community, and based on that, here's the guiding principles, and here's what we see from the data and from the feedback are the priorities of projects that we would look to find and pursue, so that people understand what we are going to do as a trust, and not just be, hey, it's a group of people who've got a couple $1 million to spend, they're going to figure something out. So I'm wondering if people think that we could use this platform to educate, share the data, solicit feedback, and really use it to build community support, particularly since we can't go to Rotary Club, we can't go to the senior center, we can't we can't do an open Q&A session in the Great Hall because of COVID-19.
Well, to Ed's point, what I would suggest we do is that we ask Gayton to put together a proposal that's in multi-phases with an open-ended timeline, such that we can come up with costs for certain services that have an escalator if, in fact, it takes a long time to get the work done. But I find comfort in the concept of the discussions that he just proposed, in the sense that we're all new to the game. These guys have been at it for a while. They have what I would see as a very useful platform to provide services. And once we have that proposal structured in the way I'm suggesting, that we go to the powers that be at the state level and see if they would fund it. In other words, this sort of becomes an open scope concept with, if you will, a consultant who's well versed in the programs.
Mm-hmm.
They can deliver.
So the Mass Housing Partnership has offered to pay the licensing fees to get us through fall town meeting.
Yeah.
And possibly beyond. So taking Steve's suggestion, is the working group comfortable if I take the lead and work with Gayton to get an understanding of what this might look like as a long-term tool for the trust, as far as pricing models and things of that nature?
Sounds like a good approach, Hank Roush. My concern is that you've got to have coherent content to put into the tool, and we're probably a bit away from having coherent content.
Well, I agree with that, but I would say it's better to get a proposal in front of us that we can then review and discuss, so that if we need to modify that proposal, the give and take of the committee versus the consultant, can come to pass, and it's not a last minute story to try to sign somebody up, in anticipation of a town meeting at a certain date. That's really all I'm suggesting. And if in fact we can start with that concept, we don't have to execute, but if Gayton is willing to put the effort in to create such an effort, such a document, I think it might be useful to the group in helping us formulate what we want to do.
Okay. Would we be comfortable using this as a platform to start getting community input? I'm just thinking of the time between now and when we sort of need to, even though I suspect fall town meeting will be pushed back from October into November, just given the timing of the state budget cycle, and the fact that we need that information ideally before town meetings, fall session. The fact that we'll want to gather community input and have that help guide what we present.
I think that's quite useful, Alan, and the reason why I'm saying that is because you've already had a public meeting for which their platform would allow those questions and answers to come forward and be available, for review at the time that we're now, in the community's face trying to bring forward this proposal. So I see a benefit now, just on that basis.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, then if it's okay with the working group, I'll take the initiative to, after this meeting over the next couple of days, to work with Gayton and Mass Housing Partnership and get it all figured out, and then we'll come up with a plan to get it up and running. So this is great, awesome.
Yeah, I offer that as a motion to the group.
Pardon, Steve?
I say I offer that as, in favor of what you just suggested as a motion to the group.
Okay, so we have a motion to move forward with Co-Urbanize. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll say,
Okay. Then because we're remote, Dayton gets to see the adventures of remote meetings. Under COVID open meeting laws, we get to do a roll call vote. So I'll start, again, I'm just going in the order of my tiles here. So Steve?
Durrett, yes.
Amy?
Yes.
Ed?
Bain, yes.
Hank?
Roush, yes.
And Alan Edinburgh is a yes. So it is 5005 being present. Just making a quick note here in my notes so I don't lose that for the minutes. Okay, so Dayton, I will be in touch probably later today.
Great.
And we'll figure this out and we'll move forward. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dayton.
Your time.
Thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Same to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we're at our last item on the agenda, which is a discussion of next steps and action items, and loop back quickly. So, Ed is going to start pulling the data and start drafting content for the front sections of the analysis, recommendation, and plan. I'm not sure you're going to have a draft for us to review at our next meeting, but
Hopefully I'll have sections.
Okay.
Obviously, as you can see, we have different groupings. So what I would want to do is try to at least start up content on different sections of the 2 and 3 section, 2 and 3 chapters, whatever you want to call them. I have a question just before we go on. Given that this document is, because it affects all of us, would be what we want to deliver to the town in support of an article in the fall. What's our, I'll use the word publication date that we should chisel into our schedule? So that sort of pushes, gives us a boundary.
If town meeting wasn't rescheduled, we would need this beginning, 1st of September to the middle of September at the latest. Because what would happen is this would go with warrant articles. Those get reviewed and placed on the warrant by the Board of Selectmen. And then there would be a presentation for Selectmen support to the Board of Selectmen. You would also go to Advisory Finance Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Given the nature of what we're doing, it would be great for us to get on the Planning Board's agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know if it's typically done, but there's a possibility we might want to ask the Zoning Board of Appeals for their thoughts on it, just because they see zoning and building issues from a different perspective. I'm not something, if that's appropriate or in their scope, but if it is and they're willing, it's something we might want to do. And so we're probably looking at about, at this point, 5 to 6 weeks to have.
Well, if we're looking at September 1, and we can, I like to set a date and shoot for that as much as possible.
And we would be meeting on September 11. We'll meet on like September 4 and September 11, something like that. And September 11 that would be your last chance to do a final review if you're going to hit the 15th.
Right.
So if you said you review, if you put kind of tentative agenda, final review before release to the public of the 11th of September, you're gonna have to have some reviews before that.
Yeah,
That would kind of give you a roadmap, because you can't push any further than that. Even if you push town meeting out, it's gonna be tough to go beyond that, because you're gonna have to have a warrant before you even push the meeting out.
Right.
Yeah, Hank's right. The dates are going to be set by when we normally would have town meeting, based on the content that goes into it. And as Hank said, if the town meeting is moved, the agenda for the meeting and the warrant will be fixed. So I think those early dates are the ones we got to target. I would suggest that that in the person of the chair, that there be an update discussion with the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, say in their last meeting in August, and we can all watch on the tube when that happens, so that they don't feel out in the dark. If town meeting does move later, then there's more time to deal with the total content of the package with the planning board and the zoning board of appeals, as a further development of the process. But at least that way they have some inkling of what we're doing, although it may not be complete at the time you have to schedule with them.
Okay. Okay. I'll start reaching out to those boards, and ask for them to hold time on their agendas late in August, if possible. Okay. So on the governance side, just to recap quickly, Hank, you're going to speak to some other housing trusts about oversight and what works, what doesn't. And do we want to maybe do a little comparison grid or something with some of the trusts that are out there to give us a feel, so that at next meeting we'll allocate a little more time to discuss some of the issues you raised and come to decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll put the data in some format that it's easy to read, and I'll try and take a cut at the first pass of a section 4.
Okay.
Once we have let's say our grouping of information that we garnered from other housing trusts, I would think it might be interesting to put those summaries together and then revisit with those housing trusts, perhaps in a meeting like this, where we have some ability to say structure a question or expand a question to those trusts, as our trust or as our group creating the trust. I would feel that would be quite helpful to get some of the flavor of that, because you always know there's secondary comments that come from that, which turned out to be very helpful in learning without having to experience the pros and cons of certain things that happen as we go forward.
Okay, so Steve, would you have time to assist Hank with some of the outreach then?
Yeah, I'd be happy to if he wants me to, sure.
Okay, so I'll leave it to you two to coordinate.
Okay.
Excellent. So for the outreach, for the community engagement team, I think over the next 2 weeks before our next meeting, and Amy, I know that with Valeria and Jennifer not here, you get to make the commitment and then voluntold them as well. I think it would be helpful to start thinking about what questions we want to ask the community to help guide us, and also start looking at some of the materials that that have been prepared in the for past meetings and things, and decide what information we want to share. If we're going to go, as we get Co-Urbanize up and running, I can coordinate with you on getting that information up onto the site, and getting that process going, and maybe start by looking at the survey questions that the Master Plan Advisory Committee used and expand on those. Okay, and then we'll have some time at the next meeting to sort of say, here's our plan for community engagement between now and town meeting. crash course. And then I'll ask, Leah and John, if there are places that you want to volunteer and help with the effort.
I'm happy to help wherever. If there's anybody that specifically needs help, just let me know.
Okay. Can you share with us the questions and sort of the feedback related to housing from the Master Plan Advisory Committee?
Sure. So we were looking specifically at the master plan survey to give us some feedback for the housing. There was like 2 or 3 questions in there. But we were looking to get a little bit more anecdotal information, just saying, because the survey did ask what type of housing is needed, but we were thinking looking at the data and all that information doesn't necessarily, it tells us what's there, but it doesn't tell us what's needed. So we were talking about reaching out to different populations that might not be reached through the survey or through other means. And then we had to stop the master plan work, so we haven't really gotten to that. But we would support, I would assume, I haven't asked the other 2 members, but I would assume we'd support a more detailed survey put out by this group. That would probably help our work.
Okay. If there's any, I don't know when your subcommittee's planning to meet again. If available, I'd be happy to join. But any information that you want to gather, I would say let us know, and we'll see how we include that in our effort.
Yeah, that'd be great. We haven't set a date to meet next.
Okay.
I think we're waiting on the main master plan group to say it's okay to start meeting again.
Would it be too much to ask to see if you guys could meet, so we get your input and direction and coordinate, given our timeline?
I can reach out to them.
Okay, great. Appreciate that.
Yep.
And Leah, is there an area where you want to?
I'm happy to help in any way you deem fit. So I'm here to help.
Okay. Why don't I follow up with you after the meeting then?
Sure. Awesome.
Okay, great. Okay, any other issues and concerns? If not, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a
Second, but I don't think we need it.
Okay, so roll call vote, again, by grid location. This time I'm going to go right to left. Amy?
Yes, I vote to adjourn.
Okay, Alan votes to adjourn.
You too.
Steve?
Yeah, same here.
Ed?
Bain, yes.
And Hank?
Roush, yes.
Okay, so with a vote of 5-0-0, 5 being present, we are